talked about some of the challenges and indeed some of the gaps. There seems to be a lot that we need to focus on or look at in terms of standardization, regulatory pressures, and this leads into some of what a few of you have just spoken about, including you just now, Andrew. Um, how does SSI and DID actually fit in with addressing some of the challenges and some of the issues? Um, it's becoming one of those areas which everyone's talking about. Not many people understand, and not many people understand how they fit together, or if indeed one does actually solve some of the challenges related to the other. Could we have a view on that?
Sure. So identity is a fundamental right. And when you think about whether it's financial services or any other services, you need an identity. And what Bhupinder has mentioned over here in terms of the financial inclusion, that is the biggest block. And even in the, not only for the financial inclusion, but even when we look into the more developed organizations, developed countries, and the developed economies and the customers, right? We are still struggling to establish our identities. So KYC is a common problem, and that's more regional problem. It's a degree of issue is regional than the global. So we need to establish the customer identity in the first place, whether we want to bring them into the financial inclusion or whether we want to get them a better financial services. And it is imminent and more critical now than ever before because we are moving towards the open finance. We are at open banking is the stepping stone. We are talking about only the payments and the account services. We are going into the future and we are already seeing the use cases of open finance. And what is the fundamental? And that's your identity. And how we can solve that? The only answer that I can think of is the decentralized identity or the SSI. There's no other way around. We can see the benefits from the identity. Pretty straightforward example. Look into Asia, right? Look into India for that matter. UID has changed the face of the financial inclusion as well as the banking and payments in India. And that's a global story today. In UK, we are looking at the digital identity in next coming years. This week there was an announcement and a press release that yes, government is pretty much focused on the digital identity for UK market. And similarly, European market that is already in place. And we can look into multiple use cases. FinID from Brazil, Netherlands, Bank is already using SSI. So there are multiple use cases already in place. It's a matter of the degree of the use cases, whether we are doing it at national level, whether the interbank network is ready for that. And that's where the fundamental challenge is.
Ritesh, I will add one more point to the problem which I've seen and experienced is, so yes, consumer identity is important. Right? I think one of the things which is less understood is, as we talk about banks have been historically trusted place. How do I say if I open a fintech and how do I make sure that my fintech is trusted? Right? So this is not just about the consumer. Before I download that smart app, which is best of the best, how do I know as a consumer that this is valid? This is not a fraudulent app from North Korea or rogue state who's just gonna have somehow integrated with the banks. And once I hand over my credential and consent, they're gonna do whatever they want to. So I think it's not just the B2C, there's a B2B problem as well in order to have a fully certified or accredited environment to have where banks, fintechs, and consumer can each trust each other. So again, and just last thing is, of course, it's easier for a regulated world like UK and Europe because if I have a fintech, I need to go through checks and balances, just like consumer has to go through checks and balances as a part of KYC process. My organization, even though it's a UK limited, I cannot touch the bank data, even though it's named as open banking. Okay, I need to get an approval from Financial Conduct Authority, and then they will make sure that I have a legitimate business, my background. Hence, only I will be able to touch the data. So, in my opinion, there are two problems which SSI can solve. There are some pilots being done in Canada, which I can mention. So some of the organization data is available on blockchain, right? So that's the good part. Then that means that it is already decentralized, available for the organization which are already registered. And what do I need now? I only need to surface that trusted information sources in the part of a contract into the mobile app, or something. I think it's in simple word, it would be something like which we all know, an ISO standard or a Hallmark standard or something, right? Which says that this establishment, whether it's a fintech or a bank, has been validated or has gone through some kind of checks. So SSI, I genuinely believe, have more than just the digital consumer use case, to solve.
Okay, great.
See, in India, what they did, they tried to integrate your PAN card with the Aadhaar card. So it was of course for tax purposes, but also it was trying to create, combine two identities into one and to make it more perfect. That either Aadhaar card is genuine or PAN card is genuine if they are matching. If they are not matching, then there is fake ID. So, to rule out all those cases, this type of system has been created, and then ultimately, whatever Bhupinder and Rajat they're saying is that ultimately everything, the buck stops at the door of banks because they have the total control of the data and the identities. So they have to be ultimately the main entity responsible for the final identification of either the supplier or the consumer, whatever be the case.